Hey, it's Money Love time. I'm Faye. Thank you for joining us. We've had a pretty good run actually with the videos that we've done recently, and we've had some great response from you. So thank you for that. I'm really enjoying this new phase of talking about money. I enjoy it as a break also from talking about the news, which tends to be fairly grim. So this is a nice sort of happy thing for me to do. So I'm glad to be able to do it. Before we go further, though, a quick introduction for our partners on this show. Money Love is in partnership with Frio, which is a brand new banking experience. Frio offers you credit. It offers you opportunities to shop better, to do more with your money. And that is why Frio and my team have partnered to be able to talk about money with you week on week. Now, also, we got some really cool questions from you. So we're going to try and answer those questions before we get to what we're going to talk about this week. So our first question comes in from Muzam Kazi, who says, how do you get a financial advisor? Is there any institution for financial advisory? So we talked about this a couple of weeks ago where I said that this is how I would choose a financial advisor. I would look for someone who has adequate experience, who has a good clientele list, who they're already servicing, and who doesn't mind sort of spending time and energy explaining things to me until I understand them. Also, the person should be available to me whenever I need them. That's how I pick a financial advisor. Now, financial advisors could either be independent or linked to an organization. Independent basically means they function like your neighborhood doctor, which is they have a little office. Sometimes they don't have an office, but they just function by themselves. They're independent and they have a clientele that comes to them. And then there are institutions, banks, wealth management organizations that have, financial advisors linked to them. But remember, whichever route you go through, try and make sure the person is adequately qualified. They have to do some basic exams with SEBI in order to qualify to do the job at all, and make sure they have other clients. What you can do is, of course, ask the person, do you have other clients that I can call and do a ref check with? Or if you want to go via an organization, because that way you can make sure that the person is in fact properly qualified. There's a question from Sneha Prabhu. She says, how do you store and remember passwords if you change them regularly? And this is a valid question, actually, because the bank keeps telling you, okay, it's time to change your password. It's time to give you a new password. It has to be complicated. It has to have like a special character and a number and something in caps. So how do you remember it? One thing you can do is write it down in a notebook. Make sure the notebook is not in a place that's easily accessible to other people. Also, one of the things to do is to never write the customer ID or your sign-in ID and your password in the same place. Write them in two separate places. And also don't make it obvious. So don't say, this is my net banking password, but write it in such a way that if you need to refer to it, you'll find it. The trick that I use though, and it needn't necessarily work for you, is that I don't ask my computer or my laptop to remember any passwords. I actually force myself to remember it. So I key it in every time I use the net banking or whatever else we're talking about. And the more often you have to key it in, the more likely you are to remember it, because you have to memorize it. So I try and memorize a lot of the passwords. Again, that works for me. It needn't necessarily work for you. Because you remember, before we had cell phones, we had to memorize a lot of numbers. So it's possible for the human brain to remember multiple passwords. But if you can't do that, it makes sense to write it down and keep it in a safe place. I hope that works. Now, let's get to what we're going to talk about this week. Now, we got a lot of questions over the last few weeks. We were talking about mutual funds and credit and a bunch of other things. People wrote to us and said, should we buy mutual funds from this app? I don't know if it's safe or not. Should I take credit from this app? I don't know if it's safe or not. So there are a lot of apps now offering a lot of services, right? And everybody's wondering whether or not this is safe and where these came from and what these are. So today we're going to talk about something called neobanks, or new banks, basically. So what is a neobank? Now, the textbook answer to that question is a neobank is a smart app bank, basically. It's a bank that exists purely on your smart devices and doesn't have any physical branches at all. But how does that really work? So I remember when I was a kid, my dad took me to the bank to show me how to do banking, basically. He believed it was a life skill that we all had to learn. And I remember going to that bank, and I think it was Canara Bank or Syndicate Bank in Bangalore, I don't remember. And we went to the bank, and I had to get a token. It was very exciting. So you get this token number, and then you're waiting for that token number to be called on that big screen. Yes, I am that old. So waiting for a token number to be called on the screen. And then you go up to this counter and you have a passbook. and this person updates your passbook for you. It's all very exciting. It's a terribly long wait, and then there's always a very grumpy, sort of unhappy human being on the other side that you have to deal with in order to get your passbook updated, or in order to, use a check or whatever, make a deposit, as the case would be. You had to fill in these little these little counterfoil tags and stuff like that. But going from there, where you had to go to the branch for everything you did, into the net banking world, which is what we've been using for the last, say, 2 decades, where you go into your net banking and then you do all of your work via net banking or via your phone, into apps where even net banking now is not intuitive enough. There are too many steps and it doesn't work for you fast enough. So the apps or the neobanks are the banks that have simplified or made those processes even more intuitive, where you can open a bank account much faster. You can borrow money or take a loan much faster. You can pay your bills faster. Everything is much, much faster. Now, fundamentally, what are the things we do with a bank, right? We have savings accounts. We buy fixed deposits or recurring deposits, and we get an interest rate. You take loans from your bank. You make payments from your bank, right? So neobanks are sort of non-physical banks that exist only on your smartphone app, who figure out how to do all of these things in an intuitive, sort of faster way without using any sort of physical presence at all. So that's fundamentally how it works. Now, next question is, what is the business model? How do these actually function? Now, the first thing to remember about neobanks is, like I told you, there are no physical branches. The second thing to remember is that they use technology and artificial intelligence. Because it's an app that you give permissions to read other things that are going on your phone, they're able to map your behavior better. They're able to approve you for loans. They're able to approve your savings account and things like that much faster, because they're using AI to read you, as opposed to your physical bank that will ask you for a certain number of papers as paperwork, and then they'll say, ye nahi, ye wo nahi, ye, fill this out again, fill that out again, this is not good, that is not good. This is designed to cut all of that out and make it just faster for you. It uses technology to better all of those processes. The important thing to remember about neobanks is that they're not licensed banks yet. In India, that license doesn't exist. So what they do is the underlying product that they're giving you is actually from a licensed bank that they've partnered with. So you don't have to worry about, if I take a deposit from this app, will they run away with it or not? All you have to do is to check who the partner is, and you'll know that they're actually giving you a deposit with a partner bank. It could be RBI, it could be Axis Bank, it could be HDFC. One of these banks are in the back end. So the loans, the deposits, the credit cards, whatever they're giving you is actually from one of the traditional banks. They're only giving you the interface to make it better. So that's the other thing to remember. And remember, you can always go into the back end and check if this is the partner, if this is the product that you're getting from that partner. Now, one-click transactions and things like that. So what is the business model? How do these guys make it work? It's very simple. They've cut out the need for a physical bank. So they don't have to pay rent. They don't have to pay air conditioning. They don't have to pay the grumpy person at the counter to do the job. And so they save a lot of money. And that is how they make this work. Now, what do they do with the money that they save? In many, many cases, they give cashbacks to their customers and say, hey, listen, here's a reward for you for doing this. Here is a reward for you for paying your bills on time. Here is a reward for you for managing your credit better. And the relationship that they have with their customer is different from the one that traditional grumpy banks have with their customers, right? So there are many things that neobanks have done, specifically in India, that have been welcomed by audiences or by users. Now, research has told us, especially after the lockdown, younger people, first-time bankers, people in their 20s, people who are opening accounts for the first time, taking loans for the first time, find it much easier to use neobanks than to use traditional banks. Traditional banks are not as welcoming. They're a little, like I said, they're a little scroungy on the paperwork. They're slightly grumpy. You feel intimidated. You have to stand in lines when you go to the branches. Nobody wants to do that anymore. Even if you want to take a loan or you want to get a savings bank account opened, it takes a couple of days. You have to give a lot of paperwork, you have a lot of signatures. You feel like it doesn't always feel welcoming. Neobanks have found a way around it. It's easy, it's intuitive, it's designed well. It also understands, in a lot of cases, the challenges that young people feel. So one of the things that they're able to do is to tell you where you're spending your money. That, oh, this is where all of your money is getting spent. You can cut it down if you want to. It can tell you that your bills are due. It can give you a warning that your account has fallen below a certain level. Stuff like this that is friendly and useful that your traditional bank doesn't do, your neobank is doing, because it understands the customer better. So it's designing for that younger customer, whereas the older banks might have been, say, solving problems that younger customers are not facing right now. And so it's less likely that a 20-year-old will fit into that old model rather than to have a model designed for themselves. Now, there are two types of neobanks, the ones that deal with customers and the ones that deal with businesses. Another massive sector is neobanks that are designing for startups or small businesses, allowing them to do their accounts in a more intuitive way, allowing them to look at their P&L in a more intuitive way, borrow and stuff like that. Now, research actually tells us, the World Bank tells us that in India, the SME sector, the small business sector, is the least serviced by our banking sector, and our banking sector actually doesn't treat them very well. So this is an empty space that the neobanks have found space to come in and to use. One of the things that has really taken off is small credit, where basically earlier, if you wanted sort of a casual loan, a small loan for a short period of time, you'd use your credit card. And credit cards would come with, say, a 1 lakh, allowance, where you could borrow up to a 1 lakh, or you swipe up to 1 lakh on your credit card, and that makes it even more difficult to pay. Also, there are very few people in this country who would qualify for that 1 lakh or 2 lakh sort of withdrawal limit on a credit card. So a lot of people got left out. What neobanking is able to do is to offer smaller loans, 10,000 rupees, 15,000 rupee loans. This means that more people qualify for these loans. They're able to pay it back better. The relationship is better. It's not as sort of threatening as your bank has a relationship with you. And it helps you build better credit history as well by being responsible and being a more responsible borrower and user at a younger stage. Now, this doesn't mean that using neobanks is not without its disadvantages. Let me tell you what the disadvantages are. Fundamentally, online fraud. We talked about this at length last week, and you should refer to that, to the episode we put out, or the video we put out last week. Online fraud is a very real, very scary thing, and you should be careful about it. So make sure that if you are in fact going to use an app or a fintech company or a neobank to do your banking, check them out. Spend a little bit of time looking at the website, Google them a little bit, see what's been written about them, see what other customers are saying about them. It's important. The other disadvantage is that there isn't a person you can harass if you have a problem, which your traditional bank has. So that grumpy person behind the counter is someone that you can talk to if you have a problem. With neobanks, that becomes a little bit of a challenge, because there isn't someone per se that you can actually walk up to and have a conversation, or who can walk you through something. There might be customer service, but that's slightly different from this. If you are the type of person who likes to go to a branch and have someone pay attention to you and answer your questions and solve your problems like a relationship manager, then going to your traditional branch might still be a good idea. So remember, there's a lot of regulation and there's a lot of compliance. In fact, to make things sort of easier, in the comment section, in the description section, there is a link, and this is the RBI's neobank paper, where the RBI has written an entire report on neobanks in India and its regulation of neobanks in India. I doubt anyone would have the real time to read all of it, but if you choose to, if you're the kind of person who likes to do that kind of reading, then it's in the comment section as well. Take a look at it and read it. But like I said, the RBI has done a lot of work in this area, but that doesn't absolve us from doing our background sort of work as well. So it does make sense to sort of do your homework on your apps before you decide to use them. All over the world now, and I did some research before doing this video, all over the world, neobanks are disrupting the banking sector. They are bringing in new ways of doing banking, easier ways, more customer-friendly ways of doing banking, and of course, using technology to be able to read and understand customer behavior better. This might be the future. That doesn't mean you have to jump onto the bandwagon. It does does mean that if you are on the bandwagon, you can find ways to do this in a safer way that makes you comfortable and that prepares you for the future. Especially if you're a young person, using a neobank, taking smaller loans might be a good way to prepare for your more serious financial future. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Remember, our partners on this show are Frio. It's a brand new digital banking experience with everything you need to do with your money, so you can get more out of your money. It has savings, it has credit, and it has access to better money management. That's it from me. Write out questions if you'd like us to answer your questions. And if there's anything else you want to know about your money or you want to talk about, let me know what it is, and we'll work that out next week. For now, thanks for watching. Bye.